Nestled in the thickly wooded mountains of Vermont lies Black Hollow, a village long abandoned and shrouded in whispers. The locals from nearby towns warn anyone who dares to venture near, claiming it's cursed, a place where shadows whisper and the air itself feels alive. The story begins with an ambitious group of 4 friends, Claire, Ethan, Sarah, and Luke, urban explorers eager to capture the eerie mystique of forgotten places. Armed with cameras and a thirst for thrills, they chose Black Hollow as their next conquest. The drive to Black Hollow was uneventful, though the deeper they ventured into the woods, the quieter the world became. No birds sang, no insects buzzed, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. They arrived at twilight, parking their car by a moss-covered wooden sign that barely bore the village's name. A cobblestone path wound its way into the heart of the desolate town. The buildings were crumbling but eerily intact. Houses with sagging roofs loomed over the streets like silent sentinels, their shattered windows resembling hollow eyes. At the center of the village stood an ancient church, its steeple bent as though bowing to an unseen force. But it was the schoolhouse that caught their attention. A 2-story structure with its paint peeled away to reveal gray wood beneath. "Let's start here," Claire suggested, pointing at the schoolhouse. Her voice was forcefully cheery, trying to mask her unease. Inside, the air was thick with dust and mildew. Rows of tiny desks sat in disarray, as if the children had fled mid-lesson. A blackboard still bore faint chalk markings, "Do not stay after dark." Ethan laughed nervously, dismissing it as a prank from whoever had been there last. But Sarah froze. "Guys, did you hear that?" They fell silent. The faint sound of children's laughter echoed through the air, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. The group exchanged uneasy glances but pressed on, their flashlights sweeping across the decaying interior. In one of the classrooms, Luke found a diary belonging to a student named Abigail Whitmore. The last entry was dated October 13th, 1887. "They've taken the others. I can hear their whispers at night. They say I'm next, but I won't let them. If anyone finds this, leave. Don't stay after the sun sets. They're watching." Suddenly, the door to the classroom slammed shut, and their flashlights flickered wildly. Claire screamed as a shadow darted across the room. No, through the room, its form insubstantial, yet undeniably there. Ethan fumbled with the door, finally forcing it open, and they bolted outside, gasping for air. The sun was now gone, replaced by an oppressive darkness. The village was alive with faint, ghostly murmurs. "We need to leave," Sarah said, her voice trembling. But when they turned toward the cobblestone path, it was gone. In its place stood an impenetrable wall of trees that hadn't been there before. Desperation set in as they stumbled through the village, trying to retrace their steps. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a cacophony of voices, some pleading, some mocking. The friends stuck together, clutching one another like lifelines, until they reached the church. Inside, they found rows of rotting pews and a pulpit adorned with a blackened crucifix. The air was suffocating, thick with a stench of decay. At the altar lay a book, bound in leather, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and prayers written in an unknown language. "What is this?" Claire whispered, reaching for the book. "Don't touch it," Sarah snapped, but it was too late. The moment Claire's fingers brushed the leather, the church doors slammed shut, and the whispers converged into a single, malevolent voice. "You shouldn't have come." The shadows within the church began to writhe and take form, elongated figures with hollow eyes and mouths stretched into silent screams. One by one, the friends backed away, their terror mounting as the figures advanced. Ethan grabbed a candelabra and swung it wildly, but it passed through the entities like smoke. Luke pointed at the book. "Maybe it's a ritual. There's got to be a way to stop this." Claire frantically flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. The symbols seemed to shift and writhe, but one phrase stood out, glowing faintly in the dim light. She began to read aloud, her voice quaking. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as the church shook violently. The walls cracked, and the crucifix fell, embedding itself into the floor. The friends took the opportunity to run, bursting out into the night. But the village was not as they had left it. The buildings were no longer crumbling. They were pristine, as though restored by some malevolent force. The cobblestone streets glistened under a pale, cold moon, Figures stood in the windows, watching them with unblinking eyes. Desperation overtook them. They sprinted toward where they had left the car, but it was gone, replaced by a dense forest. The laughter returned, louder this time, and the shadows followed, no longer hiding. Sarah tripped, and when the others turned to help her, she was gone, vanished into thin air. Her scream echoed around them, fading into the whispers. One by one, the group was picked off. Ethan was the next to disappear, dragged into the darkness by unseen hands, his flashlight rolling to a stop at Claire's feet. Luke and Claire made it back to the schoolhouse, slamming the door shut behind them. The whispers were deafening now, and the walls seemed to breathe, pulsing like a living thing. "We're not getting out of here," Luke said, his face pale. "They won't let us." "There has to be a way," Claire insisted, clutching the diary. She flipped to the last page, where new words had appeared, scrawled in a child's shaky handwriting. "You're one of us now." Luke's scream was cut short as the shadows engulfed him, leaving Claire alone. She backed into a corner, clutching the diary as the shadows closed in. The next morning, the village was quiet once more. The cobblestone path had returned, leading to an empty car. Of the four friends, there was no trace, only the diary lying open in the schoolhouse, with one final entry. "We warned them. They didn't listen." And so Black Hollow waits, its whispers luring the curious and the unwary, forever hungry.